everyone. I'm your host, comedian, magician, Danny Whitson. But it's all tricks aside, because tonight we're turning the paranormal into the normal. Join me as we explore the gray areas of reality. We're going to talk all things paranormal, UFOs, ghosts, cryptids, and aliens, and see how it's all connected. This podcast is brought to you by the Experiencer Support Association, and we are live. So if you're an experiencer yourself, or you're just plain nosy, be sure to send me your question and subscribe to the podcast. Now, get ready, because it's going to get deep. No, really, we're going to go way out there, because this is Beyond the Tinfoil Hat. What's happening, paranormal junkies? Welcome to Beyond the Tinfoil Hat, and I'm your host, comedian magician Danny Whitson, and we are broadcasting live from the E-United Public Radio Network, the UFO Paranormal Radio Network at 105.3 FM on the Gulf Coast and 107.7 in New Orleans. Guys, we got a fantastic show this evening for you. You definitely don't want to miss it. Get your questions ready, because we got a heck of a guest tonight. She is a medium that has been hearing spirits since the age of 4 and reading the public for the last 20 years. Let's get a big warm welcome for Miss Carolina. Now, here we go, Carolina. First of all, I brought you up like a beauty pageant, Miss Carolina, which absolutely you could be, but I didn't get your last name. So if you don't mind, Carolina, if you don't mind, you kind of let the viewers know a little more about yourself.
Sure. So my name is actually Carolina Gutierrez.
Carolina.
That's okay. And I am a working medium. I do the work full time. I have been reading the public since I was 24, and I've been hearing spirits since I was 4. And this is my calling. This is what I've been brought here to do. And I'm excited to discuss all things beyond the tinfoil hat with you.
Awesome. Well, first of all, thank you for clearing up my idiocracy of names. That's Carolina is actually a really cooler name. But this is something that, I am very interested in. I've always because first of all, I'm a big believer. I've had, loved ones that have passed, and I feel like still communicate with me, if you keep your ears and eyes open. So this is something that I really strongly do support and believe in. But now you said this has started happening when you were 4 years old, which is very, very young.
Yes,
can you tell us about that first experience that you remember?
So I'm a psychic medium, so it's not just communicating with the dead. But that first experience when I was 4, please, I can't stress this enough. I did not understand that was what was happening.
Of course,
when I was 4 years old. But I remember very clearly where we lived. It was a boring Sunday afternoon. There was nothing to watch on television, and you'd watch whatever infomercials, the selling of houses. I live right in Toronto, so we get a lot of like Buffalo television. So it was like seeing Buffalo houses for sale and, this stuff. And there was this show that came on talking about something called therapeutic touch. And it was about hovering your hand over stuff and like plants and people that were sick. And I just remember my eyes were just like wide with fascination of like, what is this? This is so interesting. And I remember as I'm watching, and I'm going to guess that it was maybe 15 minutes. I don't know, right? It's just such a long time ago. But I remember while I'm listening to it, I started like hovering over the plant, my mom's plant in the right there in the living room. And then at the end, they came on, they said, but no one should do this. You have to be specially trained, and, all the fear mongering that can come along with some of this stuff and gatekeeping. And so I remember, I can't do this, right? And I remember pulling my hand away. And I distinctly remember this voice, separate and apart, that I had never heard, in my head saying, keep doing it, keep trying, go. And I was it was the first time where I was like, what is this? Like, I had enough awareness to be like, that is not coming from anywhere here in the house. That is not like, that is something else, right? And it just stayed like that. And over the years, what happened was that voice, with conditioning and with, life experience and school and, all of the stuff that kind of molds us, it really morphed into my own inner voice, what I thought was the voice of my own thoughts. And it wasn't until I was, and I had some odd instances where it was like, whoa, that was a lucky guess. How did I know that? But I never really put the two and two together. And it wasn't until I was in my early 20s and I was doing a workshop, and there was a medium in the workshop, and we all went to lunch, and the medium came with us, and we were getting mini readings. And she comes to me, and I had never done that before. And she comes to me and she says, my God, you're more intuitive than I am. You need to be doing this for a living. And I was like, what? And she goes, all those stories, all those odd kind of narratives that you have running in your head, when you meet somebody, you need to listen to those, because that's spirit talking to you. And I was like, what? And so it was very much a turning point in my life, because all of a sudden, a lot of things made sense that hadn't made sense for a long time. And I remember coming home from that, kind of sitting in my living room and just kind of sitting in the energy of that. And my guides stepped up, and they're like, great, now you understand what this is. Let's get to work. And my life has never been the same since then.
So you said your guide. So is that like the voice? The
guides that I work with, that we all have, whether we recognize that we have them or not. My gift is that, my strongest gift is that I can hear them. And so it was kind of like, oh, great, now you're paying attention. You recognize that this isn't your own thoughts. Somebody's giving you the perspective that you need to fully start to embrace this. So listen up, because we got stuff to do.
And see, that's so interesting, because I mean, I guess do you think everybody is it like an inner monologue kind of thing that
it's not like that for everyone. Absolutely not. I teach intuition development, so I recognize that there are so many different styles of how this shows up in people's lives. It's not the same, but it is an experience that I believe every human being shares, is that ability to have that internal GPS working and guiding you towards your purpose here in life. So some of us, not everybody hears it. Not everybody hears it as young as I do. Some of us feel it. Some of us just have this knowing. Some of us smell things. Some of us get just kind of images that flash, or you get kind of a hybrid of things, or an odd combination. So, a lot of people call these the clairs, the different kind of ways that they show up, clairaudience, clairvoyance, things like that. I don't even think that's appropriate to kind of categorize it, because in my 20 years, I've met so many different people that experience this, and this awareness and this knowing in so many different ways. It's really a matter of you learning what your own, I call it your intuition language. How is your intuition speaking to you every day?
How do you learn to trust it? Because like a lot of people who, people have that and they never listen to it. They never trust it. And you think back, whoa, or when that moment happens, and you're like, I was thinking of that, but
yeah.
What, how did you get brave enough? Let's say that. What made you brave enough to start trusting your intuition?
So, I have experiences that color my past that were evidence enough for me to recognize that when I trusted it, things were really interesting or really good, right? So for example, I remember I used to waitress in high school, and I went up to this group, and it was a big group. I think it was like 15 people. And the guy says to me immediately, like as soon as I got to the table, he's like, if you guess my sign, a big tip's in it for you. And I was like exhausted. Like I had, waitressing is not an easy job, even for when you're like young and full of energy. Right. And I was like, I just said the first thing that popped in my head, because I'm like, let's rush this along because I got other tables to do. And I said the right thing. And the entire table just hushed in silence. And the guy was kind of pale, because I think one of them was like a statistician. So they're like, the probability of this, and they were like, how did you guess that? And then somebody's like, you prepared, like they were all kind of like, are you? And I was like, I'll be back. Let me go when you're ready to order. I didn't really pay attention to it. And then throughout the entire meal, they're like, do it again. And of course I couldn't do it because I was now thinking about it, and I'm seeing my tip exponentially go up, right?
Ding, ding.
I had an agenda. Yeah. So, there was somebody that, I was a teenager in the 90s. So I had been introduced to somebody over the phone, and he had told me he'd be going to this festival. I'd never seen him in my life, didn't have a picture. There was no internet at the time. And it was a festival here in Toronto by the lake. It was about 10,000 people minimum. I picked him out of a crowd. I walked right up to him and I picked him out of a crowd. And he went pale. I do that a lot to people. He went pale. And his friend turns to him and he goes, you better watch out, buddy, because that's a witch. That's an absolute witch, right?
So this was in the 90s, right? This is way before. Okay, folks, online dating didn't exist back then. There was none of that. And there was no catfishing you. You were like, nope, I know.
I know. I just knew it was almost like it's like I couldn't see anybody else. It was like it was a faceless crowd except this person. And I was like, this is him. I know this is him, right?
I got to ask you this now. So did you guys hook up?
No, we didn't. Oh. I scared.
You scared him.
Can I swear on here or no?
Well, no, we can't.
No, okay. So
I wish we could, but we can't. We're on the radio
poop out of him. Let's put it that way.
You scared the poop.
Yeah. So
that's hilarious. I would have loved to have seen that though. Imagine his story. He's like, yeah, I'm never blind dating again,
And it wasn't even a blind date, right? Like we still hadn't gone to that point. He just like, oh, I'm happen to be going to this thing. And my friend had called me up. I got off work at 10 o'clock and she goes, hey, we're all going down. Do you want us to pick you up and head down? I'm like, okay, sure. Like it was very not coordinated or planned in any way, right? Well, at least consciously, who knows. But yeah. And so but
let me ask you this. See, this is okay. When I think about mediums, it's like, and I've had a few people here on the show, and this is one thing that always blows my mind is because a lot of people there's some things that people have a fear of, and you just have to do it and trust you and they can do it, but to me, I couldn't imagine, and trust me, I've stood in front of a lot of people and said a lot of crazy things, okay, but there's something about like walking up to a total stranger in a crowd and just because it's popped in my head, you know what I mean? And trusting that and just going up and saying, Doug, and, totally being,
but
wrong.
What could be wrong? Like, I don't know. I think actually that's a lot less scary to me than a crowd, because he'd be like, no, I'm not Doug. Oh, okay. Like
I guess
nothing happens, right? It's like I wasn't going to tell him why I thought it was him, or do you know what I'm saying? Like I think standing, like I do group readings, and that's taken me a while to do, and that's much more nerve-wracking, I find.
Do you do okay? So you've done like crowd readings, like where you
have,
okay?
Yes.
So that's interesting. So you said you just don't talk to dead people. But I mean, what's your take on that? Like, remember who was the guy that was very popular maybe 10, 20 years ago that did the
John Edwards?
John Edwards.
The one that was on TV.
Yeah. What's your opinion, if you don't mind me asking, about, that and what John Edwards, I mean, I don't know John. I've never met him. I don't know anything about him really.
You're preaching to the converted here, Danny. Like I clearly believe, right? Like I've made a living out of it, and I speak publicly on it. So my style is very similar to his when I do group readings, right? I don't go person by person. It's whoever kind of steps forward and where they're hanging out. But yeah, you know what? Listen, if this gift has taught me one thing, is that life can be magical. right? And the only thing that stops us from that, and magical in a very respectful way, not in a fantastical way, but magical in that what we've been taught about this world isn't necessarily true, and that there are really other things out there, other phenomenon that we might not understand, but it doesn't mean that we get to dismiss it, at least not in my world, right?
I believe that.
I grew up as a Star Trek fan. The entire franchise lifted me up and carried me through childhood, adolescence, and adulthood, because I firmly believe that that's a possibility, right? And I think that open-mindedness can expand to many different areas that people might consider alternative or fringe views. But
I agree with you. I agree with you 100%. Let me do this. We'll pick right back up. But we got a fantastic question from Miss Julie Evans. Thank you so much, Julie, for coming back. We enjoyed you last week. But Julie's got a fantastic question here for you. How did you develop yourself or training on your basic skill?
Okay, that's an awesome question, Julie. So I'm a bit unique in that my spirits taught me. So I really didn't go out and get training. I didn't look for this kind of to develop this. Like I said, that day I came home after talking to that medium, they're like, great. Literally, I could hear them go like this and be like, great, we got work to do. And bit by bit, it's been them try this, do that. So my gift is unique in that I can hear. Not everybody can hear, right? And so it's a little bit different as people work out how it shows up for them. But if I can give you a couple of tips, it'd be number one, you want to try out something really simple. So when I teach my intuition development course, and I have like what I call an intuition formula, do this, this, and this, and then see what shows up for you. And we do it in class and we practice on each other and stuff. And one of the things that I say to people is never, ever start with asking that burning question that you've had your whole life, that your entire life is shaped around the answer and the circumstances of that question. That is an absolutely wrong question to start with, because you have so much riding on that question. There is so much static and baggage and trauma around that question. I don't care who you are, because that's just the way life is. Life is traumatic, and we have these events that shape us and mold us. So I always say what you want to start off is you want to start off with the most basic, mundane, simple stuff that it has almost no consequence, if none at all, to your life. So for example, if you're taking the dog for a walk and there's no cars visible, but you're about to come up to a section, ask, what color car am I going to see? Or is the driver of the person next to me, when they pass me, are they going to be male or female? Right? Now, there's a little bit more to that, but that's really kind of the basic questions that you can start to figure out. How does your team, your internal spiritual team, communicate with you, right? You're starting to build that language.
And, you know, I'm a big, I have told this story on the podcast before, but I always got to share this because, you know, when both my parents have passed, but when my mother, I mean, you know, it's okay. You know, it's life. It's the process. You know, I do miss them dearly, but here's the cool thing is they still talk to me. They're still around me. They're still but I always tell this story. It seems like my mom is more. It seems like my mom communicates more than anything. And I always tell people, you know, to keep your eyes and ears open, you know, whenever you lose a parent or a loved one close to you, because they're still with you. They're still there. And this was the latest thing, and I always have to share this story real quick. But I remember this was a few months back. Well, actually, it was back in February. I had woken up and I was having a rough day, you know, and I was kind of bummed. And the first song, I'll do this. A song that my mom would always sing to me back when I was a kid. It was one of our favorite little songs in the 80s. And you may remember is the old "Don't Worry, Be Happy" song. You know,
absolutely.
Yeah. You know, I was a little kid and, you know, we'd sing it with each other, you know. But anyways, I woke up, was having a rough morning, and then I turned some music on, and that's the first song I hear. Okay. So I thought, yep, that's mom. That's mom's, swinging by to say hello. And then it really dawned on me. That morning, I realized
was her anniversary.
It was her birthday.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Yeah.
It was just, you know what I'm saying? So
absolutely.
That's what, I tell people, it's like, they're with you and they are communicating you. I don't get it. I don't know where they're at. I don't have all the answers to that. But all I know is that if you keep your eyes and ears open, your senses available, you will be able to communicate with them somehow. And that was my mother's way of letting me know, and that changed my whole view, my whole day. I was happy, How you doing, Mom?
Definitely. And I think also what we fail to realize, especially in the West from a spiritual perspective, is that we've lost our reverence or our understanding of the important role that our ancestors play in our daily lives. And if you look at traditions outside of the West, ancestors are front and center.
Oh, right? Yeah, all the time. Yes, yeah. Absolutely. I wonder why. Why does, it's like we put them away, and who knows? And I was actually a guest on a podcast last night, and I brought this up, and this is one thing that really kind of blew my mind. Is I'm not a religious person, but I am a spiritual person now. And I went from full-blown atheist to not believe in anything probably 7 years ago, 8 years
ago.
Okay. Well, I don't know how familiar you are with magicians, but a lot of magicians don't believe in anything fun.
Yes.
So, I mean, you would think, for God's sakes, this guy's doing card tricks. You think he would believe in some, but really they're the biggest skeptics out there, period. And I was the typical magician. Everything I knew the answer to, I knew all the tricks. I knew all this, but it's funny how the more I got more into the paranormal world, if you want to call it, that I call it it's making the paranormal normal.
Yeah.
But the more I got involved in this, and is the more that I came around to, I don't belong to a certain religion, but I believe in God. I believe in these things. I believe in an afterlife, another,
So is it okay if I ask you a question, even though this
absolutely,
because I think it's really important what you shared. How has your magic tricks or your magic show changed since embracing this? Because I'm wondering if you've noticed kind of a shift as to what shows up for you or the effects of your illusions.
Probably the biggest thing that I like to, one thing that's different about me is a lot of magicians that they do put the magic front and center ahead of them, and that's okay. That's a thing that a lot of magicians do. Like you see the magician and he's going to make the elephant disappear, so the illusion is bigger than the character himself. And I'm a little different. Danny Whitson, if you see my show, my character is bigger than my magic. My show is but the thing that since that, has kind of happened, I used to be the traditional, I've got to do the biggest, coolest, greatest trick in the world. But with me now, I like to portray it for what it is. But at the same time, I'm not obsessed with the magic or the comedy. I'm obsessed with, I want you to leave with an experience. Do you get what I'm saying?
Yeah, the connection
exactly.
To the audience.
The connection. Absolutely. Yeah. The connection. That's what I want. And I just use the magic and comedy as a tool to connect with the audience.
Have you noticed that improve with your spiritual
absolutely.
enrichments?
Absolutely. Because another thing is, I always mention this too, is ego can be a problem. Ego can be a good thing. I think everybody does need some type of an ego to, but also if it gets too out, it can be an issue. So, and I think a lot of magicians,
you got to keep it in check, right?
You do.
You got to recognize it, right? And know what it is. So
Absolutely. So it's helped me stay humbled, and keep my ego in check. I mean, I'm not trashing magicians here, but a lot of magicians will run into an ego issue, and this is why it's not their fault. This is what people. Well, let me explain. Is like, imagine walking in the room, and a magician, a well-trained magician, can totally do this, and saying, I can fool every single body in this room, including that engineer, including that scientist. It doesn't matter. So over time, it's naturally you do build this sense of, power, if you want
greater
to say.
than importance.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. The same can be said for a psychic and a medium. The absolute same can be said, because one of the things that I tell people, listen, I hear voices and I don't need a tool. I just sit in front of people. I do shows all the time. Somebody sits in front of me and I just talk and I say, and this is happening, and so if you don't keep your ego in check, you can convince yourself of whatever you want, right? And that's not healthy. And so part of developing anyone's intuition, whether they're a natural medium or whether they just have some basic intuition that people are born with or somewhere in between, you need to really understand, what are your triggers? What are your weak spots? What are the things that kind of blind you a bit, right? It's really important that you do that work. And I'm probably a little bit unique in the spiritual field, where I say I do recommend therapy for people, at least initially, and to be able for you to understand, what's that internal dialogue look like for you? What are the things that might still be kind of flashing a red light or bleeding for you from your past? Because I tell people, that's where you cannot trust your intuition, because there's a lot of noise around that. And so one of the things that happens is you'll be really good at maybe reading other people, but you're crap at taking your own advice, right? And it's because you haven't done that work. And so part of developing, going back to Julie, I think Julie's question was doing that work, because otherwise you can develop a spiritual ego and overinflated sense of self-importance that will take you out of this game like this.
And I think that's so important to do. That's one thing I keep myself in check, and the spiritual side of me also helps me stay there. But I always found it interesting with the way my journey has turned out. Because where I'm from, when you grow up, you hear about psychic mediums, ghosts. That's the devil, and it's funny. It's like, it's funny. All this stuff has literally brought me around to the good things, to God, to a spirit, and with no judgment. This is something. And you also you nailed it on the head when you said that, people who, I don't care who you are, everybody has had that one psychic thing that's popped in your head. So I think people do have ability. I think everybody has an ability to do this, but some people are more talented than others. Like, I can shoot a basketball, but I'm not LeBron James, Yeah, exactly. So I think some people, are a little more gifted, like yourself, Well, I tell you what, I do want to do this. We got to cut to a commercial break right here in a second, but as soon as we get back, I want to, talk to you a little more. Even I want to bring this up too, because I just heard this today about the Stargate thing. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but that was kind of a psychic thing. But we'll be right back after these messages.
Have you ever wondered, or maybe just thought to yourself, if there were others just like you? You know, people with extraordinary abilities, psychogenic advancement, and perhaps unique intuitions. Maybe you just wondered if there were other people who experienced unimaginable, unexplained, or even unusual and paranormal events. Are there people who have more questions, more fears than answers? Well, you're not alone. You've never been alone. We believe you. Sign up for EA today.
Business. It's your property.
Your assets are worth protecting. Blacklight Investigative and Surveillance Services specializes in patrolling and inspecting residential or commercial property against fire, theft, vandalism, terrorism, and illegal activity. People and buildings are monitored to prevent crime. Keep your property, your people, and your assets safe from threat. Our elite staff are dual licensed private investigators and security guards. Blacklight Investigative and Surveillance Services.
Go to blacklightiss.com.
All right, guys. If you guys are just now tuning in, we have been talking with psychic medium. Make sure I get this right. Is it Carolina?
Yes, it is. Perfect.
And how do I say your last name again? I'm sorry.
Gutierrez.
Gutierrez. Did I say it right or did I jack it up?
Yes. No.
Anyway, I just wanted to make sure I didn't miss it. But definitely, now, this is, I know I threw this right at you right before the break, so I want to make sure I can clear this up. I just was listening to this today. It was another show, and they I think, have you ever heard about the Stargate thing that I guess the CIA was involved in with psychic mediums and like?
I've heard like bits and pieces of it. This is a really big world, right? This is a really big world, and this is a really big topic. And I always say to people, you know, when you enter the theme park that is this kind of alternative view, there's a lot of rides and there's a lot of cliques and there's a lot of places to go.
Well, the thing I loved about, I don't want to go because I don't know a whole lot about it myself, but it was just a government funded program that is now, it's kind of been released out to the public knowledge, that these things were going on, and they were studying, remote viewing, psychic medium, and but it got shut down. Apparently, from what I hear, it got shut down because this is the devil's work. It's bad. We're going to shut it down. While all our other people in the country, China, Soviet Union, were, okay, well, we're going to keep studying it,
Right.
So that tells me alone, like if anybody was to ever be a skeptic or anything attack kind of like this phenomenon, I mean, no, trust me, the government wouldn't be wasting its time on it if there wasn't something there. And they are still spending money on it to this day doing research. Now with you, now you do this, I mean, for a living as well. Do you, I mean,
do.
you take appointments? Okay. Now, how long have you been doing it? I guess professionally, I guess that's what you want to call it.
20 years. So it's very
20 years.
Yes.
Okay.
Years.
So I got to ask, what is some of the interesting things, you know, because in a way it's kind of like a superpower. You know what I'm saying? So, I mean, if what is, have you ever heard like bad news? Have you gotten bad news?
Absolutely.
And
now you have to understand the world. I think every psychic's worldview affects what they're open enough to see, right? So you have people in this community that don't believe that evil exists, that bad things are. I was like, yeah, don't come see me. That's not me. That's not my worldview. And that's not what has been shown to me over and over again.
So you're not going to sugarcoat everything.
No, like I try and be as compassionate as possible. I'm also a licensed counselor here. I try and provide culturally appropriate mental health support and an area where people can trust that you have the training, but that you're open to this. So I'm unique in that, in the counselors, at least in my area. I think it's starting to improve. But definitely it's something that, again, I don't sugarcoat, but I'm compassionate in the delivery of the message. But understand that now I can't speak to everyone. I can only speak to how I work with my spirit team. But I can't, if they'll say something, and I know it's going to be a rough thing to hear, right? And they'll be like, I cannot get the other messages until I get that one out. So my own crew, my spirits keep me to a certain ethical and moral, not moral, but more values in regards to the genuineness and the legitimacy, not changing it based on what I hear. So like a lot of the work that I do is making sure that I'm as clear as possible so that my own prejudices don't get involved when I'm reading somebody. So for example, my assistant gives me a hard time about this all the time because there are certain things that I cannot help her with. I can't read because I know her too well. And I'm like, I'm not going to be giving you the clearest, unbiased information because I care about you. I want good things for you to happen to you in life. Like I want the best for you, and I'm rooting for your goals. And so I have to be honest, that might color how I deliver. Like my best readings are total strangers. Never met them, never seen them in my life. And they're kind of like, oh my God, you're reading me like a book.
Well, you always want somebody who's going to be upfront and honest with you other than somebody. Let me do this real quick. Okay, this is a big moment because one of our favorite viewers, she's been absent for a little while. We're so excited to have her back here. We've got Liv Light, and also she's got some of the best questions ever, okay?
Hi, Liv.
She's late to the party, but she is here, ladies and gentlemen. Hello, Danny, Carolina. All right. And Tessa listeners, I just got here, but I have a question. Carolina, what is the best steps to live a spiritually inspired life? How to trust our intuition and beyond?
Big questions. Those are big questions. We could do whole shows on that. So a spiritually inspired life. Okay. So first off, I would say with that, I give in one of my bios, I tell people I lead an intuition-led life. So following those breadcrumbs, even if they don't make sense, even if right in the moment you're like, this is crazy, what am I doing? If everyone around you is saying, don't do it, but you know that those are the indications that you're getting, you trust that, number one. Number two is recognizing that a spirit-led life might not be what everybody thinks is normal or might fit into what, everyday 9 to 5 living on this planet, right? It's different goals. It's different ways of finding happiness. It might be more time than it is money. And I'm not saying that you can't be rich. Please don't get me wrong, but it just shapes things a little bit differently. One of the things about listening to your intuition, and we covered it just slightly a little bit earlier, is you want to start with really simple little things, simple stuff, right? Let's say you have, I don't know, flavored water in your fridge. Mix them up, close your eyes, stick your hand in, and guess which one you're going to get before you picked it up, right? Ask your spirit team, which one am I going to get? Because a lot of people think it's like ESP and that you're reading, and that's a branch of this. But what I always say, the safest way to do this work, any work, whether you're reading others or not, is rely on your spirit team. They're handpicked. They walk with you. They've been with you since day one. Default to them instead of you trying to use your energy and kind of like magically read minds, because that's a different ability altogether, right? And so definitely start with little things. But the other thing too is recognize that, and this is the toughest one in this work, really. I've been speaking quite a bit about it lately. You might not like what you're going to hear from your intuition. And no one says that, right? Because your intuition's purpose, in my opinion, after all these years, is leading you to the purpose that you were brought here for in this life. What is it that you're meant to create, meet, whatever that is? Your intuition's job is to get you to that path, right? You might think that your path is here, but your intuition knows that your path is actually here. And so you need to be really comfortable in calling yourself out. And that's why it's so important, understanding your ego, understanding your triggers, understanding the things that you're weak around. When I mean weak, I mean, I'll give you an example. I was raised by a single mom. And so whenever I come across a single mom in my life, I always have a soft spot, right? There's always this extra that comes out of me when I'm dealing with a single mom. I need to keep that in mind when I'm reading a single mom, because otherwise I kind of can fall back into that energy that I know so well and am not transferring the messages that Spirit's giving me to give to them in the most clear, appropriate, and I'm missing a word here. Clear and appropriate, but also without any extras, whatever the congruence of what the message was sent, that I be able to deliver that. So it becomes really, really important for you to identify that in your life before you really start to dive in here.
I think that is extremely important too, is to pay attention. And, when I would say this, and this is just something I've recently been doing, is I say pay attention to what the universe is trying to tell you. And sometimes it may not always be what you want to hear, because a lot of times people zoom in and like, no, not until I hear that one thing. Wait a minute, you are getting that answer. It's just not what you want to hear. And that's something that I have just recently learned to pay attention to.
Yeah.
Because there's times
you hear this a lot when people are like, oh, my intuition saying I'm going to teach them. And it's like, you know what? The universe is very, very good at teaching people lessons, putting them in a corner, removing all other options that you're kind of forced to take this route and learn things, right? So when I start to hear that, and I'm not saying it's in all cases, like a parent is different, but when you hear that, I'm always like, oh, there's a little, our job is to walk and live in our truth. And the example that you set by doing that, people notice it, right?
Absolutely, they do. And, I kind of spread that. I've got a circle of friends that I talk to about these things. And I'm like, listen, this happened the other day. This is kind of, what I think is kind of going on. Liv's got another question. This ties into doing shadow work, releasing the karmic and ego blocks.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's really delving deep into that dark side of yourself. Right. And I think, especially in the New Age community, we hear a lot of false positivity. And it's like, that meme where it's that little character that's sitting drinking coffee and the house is burning down and he's saying, everything's okay. I'm fine. Nothing's wrong. Right. And it's like, no, your life is falling apart, of course. Right.
Yeah. No, everything's wrong. It's bad.
Everything is wrong. It's not.
I think right now that the United States could be doing that, drinking the coffee while everything is burning now. Everybody can relate. But, and to me, what I've tried to do, I've tried to listen to these things and once again, ignore the ego, step back and be like, why am I seeing this? What's going on here? What do I need to do?
Yeah.
Even though this isn't, really my plan that I want to do it, but this is something I need to do. And then I've noticed by doing it, it's getting better.
Yeah.
It's like I said, keeping your ears and eyes open and paying attention to what the universe is telling you.
And it's not just it's your everyday life. It's conversations that might repeat without you probing it. You might hear the same reference to a supplement or a new discovery in the UFO community 3 days in a row by different people that are unrelated. And you're like, oh yeah, I think I might need to listen. But I think the one that for me is truly impactful is how nature actually speaks to us. Right. And so I have an animistic worldview. I believe that everything has a spirit and that, part of our harmony is recognizing the balance that we need to keep in all these living forces around us that are also reflected inside of us. But a lot of times we'll be driving and we'll see all these birds converge and we're like, what does this mean? Right. But nature speaks to you as well as those, a lot of people talk about the numbers that you see or the things that you dream about. But the universe is always talking to us all the time if we just be open enough to listen.
Liv has another question. I've also found that spiritual sources have a sense of humor. Got to laugh at ourselves.
Oh, yeah.
Like to absolutely.
100%. Yeah.
That's all I do is laugh at myself.
I call the universe the most frustrating project manager I've ever met because there's a clear order. There's a beautiful, odd, quirky order that's at play, but you never know the whole story. Right?
No, well, I spend so much of my life doing that. I always find the funny. I'm looking at the funny and I see these things and I'm like, I just live for irony. You know what I mean? And the universe gives it to me and shows it to me so many times, and which is a blessing. I love that,
It reminds me of Jim from The Office. Like I feel like I'm kind of always looking at the invisible camera that's not there. And I'm like, God, I'm laughing along with you because that's all you got to do in this situation. There's no other,
And that's another good thing with the ego is, there's a joke I always tell, whenever, I do something, a magic trick and people are like, well, how did you do it? And I'm like, well, I sold my soul to the devil. And they're like, what? And I'm like, yeah, he offered me $1 million, but I was like, no, I don't want $1 million. I want to do card tricks. And while you're at it, throw in some red hair and make me 5'6", will you? So that was the deal. But no, I mean, you got.
So just so you know, I've read people that have had family members that have done that. Just so you know.
So
that is not so like. Well, yes, we laugh about it, but.
Hey, okay, here's another thing, and this could actually be a whole new topic, a whole other topic for a show. But in show business, selling your soul is a real thing, folks. Okay, not to get too crazy, or too out there, because that's a whole other topic. But yes, we could talk about that for a whole nother hour. Trust me.
So I haven't read anyone where it's show business, but this was an ancestor a few generations back. And the consequences that the subsequent generations after were dealing with were very, very serious. So that was, that's not, I laugh along with you and I think we should make fun, but some of these are really serious in how they show up in people's lives.
I believe when you look at a lot of levels of, and a lot of times when we want to think about selling your soul, there's a lot of people who have sold their soul to be famous, for success, quote, and it's coming out a lot more in the media, where you've seen people, you're like, man, that guy's a real, piece of crap, piece of work. The guy sold his soul, and it's coming back around. There's so many stories, and then some things that we'll never know. We'll never know about. But there's even a show that was very popular on Netflix a few months ago, Baby Reindeer. Did you?
I haven't seen it yet. It's on my list. I haven't
seen
it.
Well, in some ways, I feel like the main character sells his soul for success. So, there's some subtext there. But anyways, that's, like I said, that's a whole new other topic episode. Yeah. I want to get right here with Liv, another question. Is there a general message for humanity from the spirit team and your psychic experiences?
That's a big one. That's a really big one. So I would say, from all the experiences of people that I've read and the stories that I've heard and I've been privy to kind of tapping into, I would say number one would be living in your truth, the importance of that, because as much as there is kind of a global timeline or timelines or kind of things that we as a collective and as a planet, we need to kind of go through and live through, we have our own that's really important and that we all play a role in, right? And so it's very, very important that we figure out what our purpose is here, right? And it's kind of like that old adage, you can't change how anybody else, the only thing that you can change is yourself. It really does tie into that spiritual and energetic purpose that you resonate with here on this planet. As a whole, that's a big statement, because I'm not one that tends to provide readings of like who's going to win the election, or mine are very personal, one-on-one, a lot of generational healing, a lot of kind of immediate stuff in people's lives. But as a whole, I think the further we get away from nature, and I don't mean that as in like I'm not here to discuss climate change or anything like that, but I mean, our ancestors were all animists. They all relied on nature for how they lived and what nature told them. And you would have people that, would go outside and they just glance at the moon and they could tell you what the weather was going to be like for the next few days or weeks. And we planted on those cycles. And so we've moved away so far from that we think that our chicken comes from the grocery store on a little styrofoam tray, right? Not realizing kind of how intrinsically we're connected and what that ecosystem looks like. So personally, I think that the more that we reach out to that, and listen, I'm not outdoorsy. I'll tell you that right now. Like, my idea of outdoorsy is a patio with a cool drink, right? But do I look to nature when I'm trying to figure something out? When I'm out for walks with my dogs and, I see the same animal kind of scurrying in front of me over and over again, I'm like, nature's trying to tell me something here, right? And so it's really a matter of becoming in tune with that and how that can affect your intuition in the long run.
Definitely. I agree with you 100%. And I think, the further we do get away from nature, the further we get away from, it gets even noisier and messier in our day-to-day lives. Well, let's do this. You have been a fantastic guest and you have answered the questions perfectly. Thank you so much. But
thank you for having me, Danny.
Where can the viewers learn more about you? Where can they get readings? If they would like to get a reading, what do they need to do?
So you can find me at curandera.ca, CURANDERA.ca. I'm only on Instagram at curandera.ca as well. I will never message you. Everything is through my website. So if someone says that it's me, it's not me. I don't go and solicit people. Everything, you can book it, pay it, and schedule it at the same time, all at once on my website.
That is all, and by the way, I didn't know that was a thing. I had somebody randomly do that to me on Facebook.
Yeah.
And I was like, who are you? How, what's going on? And you can't trust anything kind of message you get on Facebook from a random stranger because
absolutely. I'm not on Facebook at all. I'll put that out there. I'm not on Facebook at all. So yeah. And I would say 80% of my work is done online. So if you're in the GTA or Greater Toronto area or anywhere in the province of Ontario, some of my services are covered by insurance. Otherwise, we could do, there's a lot of different stuff that we can do reading wise and healing wise together. So I'd love for people to reach out. I offer a free 10-minute initial consultation just to see if it's a good fit, because I don't think that everybody's meant to work with me.
See that, you are so upfront and honest with what you do. I could tell, you are definitely a professional. Thank you so much. This has been a fantastic episode. I've really enjoyed talking to you. Carolina.
It's been lovely. Yes. Thank you.
There we go. And once again, we got to get you back on.
I'd love to. And if I could just say, listen, I hadn't understood really experience or support until connecting with you. And I'm so happy to see something like that, because nobody wants their reality denied, and having an organization like that where you're really creating a safe space for people to share these experiences. And there's so many out there. Congratulations on that. I love that.
This is definitely a safe place. And I say, hey, you come here and we make the paranormal normal, because, never be afraid to share your story or who you are on this podcast. All right, Carolina. Well, thank you so much for coming on. We've got to get you back on. Guys, be sure to check her out on Instagram. Reach out to her for a reading, and keep your life grounded. Thank you so much, Carolina, for coming on.
Have a good one.
All right, guys. I hope you enjoyed that episode. I know I did. And it was, hey, first of all, thank you, Liv. We've missed you. Hey, Lisa, we see you. I believe there was a few other people on here. Julie, come back. Thank you so much, Julie, for your fantastic questions. Guys, if you have not done so, be sure to check us out on Patreon at Heed the World. Make a little donation, a little $4 donation goes a long ways for the podcast. Also, head over to the experiencersupport.org. Check out some cool new articles out there on the website. I believe we did. I'm not sure the latest one, but we got some new ones. I can promise you that. If you have not done so yet, be sure to like and subscribe to the podcast. Tell your friends, share it to them, tell them to check it out. Say there's this idiot Danny Whitson on there. I really enjoy listening to him babble. And if you like me enough, you can head over to my Instagram at Super Magic Boy on Instagram. I post where I'm going to be doing my shows at. I would love for you guys to come see a show. Also on Facebook at Danny Whitson Magic and Comedy on Facebook. But definitely show me some love, show the podcast some love. And guys, we have been broadcasting live from the United Public Radio Network, the UFO Paranormal Radio Network, 105.3 FM on the Gulf Coast and 107.7 FM in New Orleans. This has been Beyond the Tinfoil Hat. I'm your host, Danny Whitson. I'll see you guys next Tuesday.
All right, that does it for this episode of Beyond the Tinfoil Hat. A big shout out for tonight's awesome guest, and a bigger shout out for everyone who tuned in. And if you haven't done so yet, be sure to subscribe to us on YouTube or wherever it is you listen to your podcasts. And like always, be sure to stay curious, heed the world, and keep the paranormal normal. I'm your host, Danny Whitson, and this has been Beyond the Tinfoil Hat.